All right. I just want to welcome everyone to this special Vital Conversation, which is part of the RBC Future Launch Community Challenge. And this is a special event for the Strathroy community, and it's focused on youth mental health, especially during these times of COVID. Vital Conversations are an opportunity to talk about key issues that the community is facing. And we're really honored to be having jack.org join us tonight. They'll be the biggest part of the event. And I want you to know that there will be a question and answer period where you can respond to the content that you've heard tonight. And this is a snapshot of how the event will roll out. You'll notice there's a great prize draw at the end, so be sure to stay online for that. And we've just got a few introductions that we'd like to make just to explain a little bit more context about how this event came together.
Before we get to the introductions, we just want to remind everybody that this is a great chance for us to come together and to chat about mental health and have that important conversation. However, it's not a counseling space. If you're experiencing a tough time or need somebody to talk to, we recommend contacting Kids Health Phone, and the number is on your screen, and you can also text them. That number is there too. If you are in crisis, we ask that you do go to call 911, go to your hospital, crisis center, or police station. There's also a wonderful organization called BeThere.org, which is referenced at the bottom, and that's really helpful if you know someone who's struggling and you want to have some guidance to be able to support them.
Thank you. So very quickly, my name is Lori Runciman. I'm Director of Grants with the London Community Foundation, which may make you scratch your head and wonder, why is someone from London at a Strathroy event? Well, really our name should be London and Middlesex Community Foundation, because that's the region that we support. And by support, I mean that we make grants towards programs and projects to charities in your community. And so through the RBC Future Launch, we were able to facilitate some youth-led projects that are affiliated with the Y and with VON. And so now I'm happy to introduce you to Debbie Burns, who's with the VON Middlesex-Elgin Strathroy office.
Good evening, everyone. I am excited to tell you about our youth-led project, Weaving Generations, Weaving Community. And this was made possible through the RBC Future Launch Community Challenge and support from the RBC Foundation and the London Community Foundation. Strathroy, our community, has a large youth population with 2 high schools, which unfortunately means that there's a growing percentage of people coping with mental health issues. It's also a growing population of older adults, which also means an increasing number of people impacted by dementia. And both groups don't always get the support they need and may be dealing with stigma. So our project brought together youth and older adults living with dementia to be able to use expressive art in a safe environment and to be able to create intergenerational relationships. And the program's intention was to both improve the quality of life for those living with dementia, to help preserve their sense of self, and also to equip youth with important skills, education, and experience to assist them with their future careers, as well as to help with their own mental health well-being and to develop strong relationships. So we brought together youth and matched them with a senior for 4 weekly sessions. And together they created beautiful art pieces each week, including human cutout collages, tactile jars. And it was so amazing to see each week the relationships being built, the pride in the pieces created together, and to hear feedback from the youth, the clients, and their caregivers of the difference that the group was making in their lives. Unfortunately, our spring art show and reception to showcase the work was canceled, but we are working on different ways to showcase their work and the impact to everyone involved. So stay tuned. And again, we're so grateful for the support. And I am now happy to introduce Brad Bejent from RBC.
Perfect. Thank you, Debbie. And good evening, everyone. So on behalf of RBC, I want to welcome you to the Strathroy Vital Conversations event. My name is Brad. I'm the community manager at RBC for Strathroy and the surrounding area. I am so pleased to be here today to join the conversation. The RBC Future Launch Community Challenge is taking place in 150 communities across Canada and is part of RBC's larger commitment to helping youth prepare for the future of work in a highly disrupted economy. At RBC, we believe that if youth succeed, we all succeed. And that's why in 2017, we committed $500 million to support young people across Canada in growing their fundamental skills, increasing their access to networks, and gaining valuable practical work experience that will give them a leg up upon graduation of high school, college, and university. We are always looking for ways to support our youth in the community. And that's why events like tonight, especially when discussing such an important topic of mental health, means so much for RBC to be a part of. There is no easy answers to some of the challenges our youth face today. But by having an event like tonight, having expert resources and support available, it really goes to show that change is happening, and change is critical for the success of our next generation and community. So I just want to thank everyone again for being part of the conversation, for joining us tonight, and for including RBC in the conversation. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. That's great. I appreciate that. I also want to thank RBC Future Launch Community Challenge and the London Community Foundation for making this event possible through your generous funding. I am the center manager. My name is Carrie Ann Lauren, and I am the center manager of the Strathroy-Caradoc Family YMCA. And although COVID changed our original project with this grant, with a bit of reworking, Darian, our teammate leader, and I were able to set up 44 memberships for youth, free of charge for 3 months, which was amazing. We're seeing youth use these memberships every day in our branch, and it's making such a difference in their physical and their mental well-being, which is tied in so closely to what we're talking about tonight. So I want to say thank you again for allowing us to help our community in such an important way right now, and a very relevant way right now too. Before I introduce our speakers for this evening, a couple housekeeping items for everyone listening. If you can please remain muted, it just helps cut down on background noise and maybe dogs barking or kids running in the room. If you have any questions, post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer during the question and answer period, or we'll direct to the right person who can answer a little bit later. This session is also being recorded, and we're going to send out an email following up, most likely tomorrow, along with a survey. So you'll have a recording of this event, so you can look back if there was a number or a topic you wanted to look at a little bit more or share with someone. And all of us who have spoke are very excited to introduce our guest speakers from jack.org. When we started talking about this event, Darian, the first name that came to her head was jack.org, and I didn't know anything about that. So her and I did some research, but she highly recommended them. And after being in contact with Megan, Alex, and Stuart, they're also their leader. It's easy to see why. They are passionate and truly dedicated to changing the conversation about youth and mental health, and not being silent about it, which I think we all can benefit from. They empower young leaders. There's over 2,800 leaders across the country, which are making a huge difference all across Canada. And tonight, we're so fortunate to have 2 of those leaders here to talk to us. So please, if everyone can welcome from jack.org, Megan Hendry and Alex Venn.
All righty. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry we're seeing you in a bit of a weirder format than we might typically otherwise. I'm usually up on a stage and wearing very bright red pants when I do these kinds of talks. So this is fairly new, but it's really exciting to have all these people here tonight and to be able to get to speak to you about something we're so passionate about. And I'll leave Alex to introduce himself just while I get our PowerPoint up and running.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I was currently a media student at Western, but I'm now in social work at King's. And mental health advocacy was something for me that started in high school, for sure, and kind of grew over time with a number of personal experiences related to myself and family and friends. So I really, when I heard about jack.org, it completely aligned with what I'm passionate about, and I'm really excited to be here with everyone today.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll kind of get going, just because we know we want to stick within the time frame here. So as everyone's mentioned before, we are here from jack.org. Just know, as they mentioned previously, there will be a question and answer period at the end. Because I'm sharing my screen right now and we're doing the presentation, I won't be moderating the chat throughout the talk, but we'll definitely take a look at the end. So if you've got questions throughout, throw them into the chat and we can do them in the question and answer period, as many as we can at the end. And again, they were mentioning if anything doesn't get answered, you should have access to our email addresses, if you got specific questions for us or want to know more about jack.org. But hopefully, as we go through the presentation, things will be a little bit clearer for everybody. So again, thank you for coming. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we have a lot of amazing people to thank for helping to make this talk possible. Obviously, as we've talked about here, RBC has been a big part of it, and these are a lot of our other big funders that help make all these wonderful Jack Talks possible. But we also want to make sure we give a specific thank you tonight to the YMCA and the Vaughan of Elgin Middlesex organizations for bringing us out here and having us come and talk to you guys about a topic that's really near and dear to our hearts. So thank you.
So let's jump right in. Some of you might be wondering why we're here to talk to you about mental health today, and the reason is because Canada is currently in the midst of a bit of a mental health crisis. So you can see here there are some pretty staggering statistics. 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness in any given year. Now, I was never the greatest at math, but that means over 7 million people around the country will experience mental illness in any single given year, right? So that's some concerning numbers. In contrast, only 1 in 4 Canadians will get the help they need. So only 1/4 of Canadians will actually get the help they need to truly start feeling better. And the last statistic, but certainly not the least, suicide is the #1 health-related cause of death for young people in Canada. So that beats, drug use, heart disease, cancer, right? So this should be a wake-up call for all of us, a wake-up call, to take action, because the thing about mental health is we all play a part in this conversation. And, it may sound a little corny, but we all have a responsibility to each other, and we can help make a substantial difference in each other's lives. Now, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the current situation that we find ourselves in. COVID-19 has radically changed our lives, right? So it has impacted our daily routines, it has impacted our connectedness to loved ones, our employment and financial security. A lot of us are feeling a lot more isolated during this time. And that does mean we have seen an increase in the number of mental health related issues across the country. So, sticking to a routine can be very hard. It's something that I try and do, or have done the past year or so when we've been struggling through this. But everyone has been really coping with this lockdown and this new reality in a very different way, right? So we will be, it is natural, we will all be feeling higher stress levels as we navigate this new normal. But it's very important that we, focus on self-care and make mental health a priority during these times, as well as connecting to our social supports as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Alex, for kind of kicking us off there. So just sort of a few kind of beginner questions to sort of be pondering as we dive a little deeper into the topic tonight. So just some questions to kind of ask yourself about, do you know what mental health is? And do you know how to be there for yourself and others at times that you or they might be struggling? And do you have any ideas of how to take action in the realm of mental health? And the biggest goal of our presentation is, if you can't answer all of these questions right now, that hopefully you'll have some answers to support all of them by the time we're finished up with our presentation tonight. So a little bit of background kind of about me, throwing us back probably a few more years than I'd like to admit now, to when I was sort of finishing up high school. So when I was getting done in grade 12 and graduating, I just remember all of my teachers and parents and everyone around me being so excited for me to go off to university and have like such a great experience. And no one was worried about me. And I went off with a lot of really big excitement and hope. So I got through first year okay, and then moved into second year. I was living in a house on my own. I was having much more of a high workload than I was used to in high school. And I was finding I was really struggling. I would go to the library for hours on end and just like be sitting in a sea of computers trying to do my work and just totally unable to get through it. And I would look out at everybody around me and be like, how does everybody else here understand what to do but me? Like, what is wrong with me? I am the only person that's going through this. And it got to a point where I had so much stress and I was struggling so much. I really struggled to sleep. I was having troubles eating. And I really would get into a state of, I would go to the library and I would say, okay, Megan, you're going to write this paper. I was an English major at the time. And you are not going to get up and talk to anybody or do anything until your paper is done and it's perfect. And then I remember I left the library one night in tears and I called my mom and I said, Mom, I haven't talked to someone that isn't you in person in 3 days. So she said to me, it's at a point where I don't really know sort of how to help you. I think you need some more professional support. So luckily, at my school, we had a counseling service on campus. So I went there and I remember waiting to have my first counseling appointment and I was kind of nervous. And I saw this girl walk in that I'd worked with the previous year at a coffee shop on campus named Morgan. Now, if I can explain Morgan to you, she had like long flowing hair. She had the perfect life, all these friends, this amazing boyfriend. She was like the happiest, bubbliest person I knew. And she came walking into the counseling center sobbing. And I just walked over to her and I said, like, Morgan, like, what's going on? And I remember I just don't know how I let it get this time. And I think for me, that was such a moment of, such a shocking moment of, I can't believe that Morgan, whose life looks like has everything together, is struggling in the same way as me. So really after that, kind of made me really realize that, sorry, can everyone hear me? Alex, can you just give me a thumbs up? It's telling me weird things about my headphones. We're good? Okay, sorry.
We're good now, yeah.
Oh, we're good now? Okay. I don't know why these are connecting. Let me just disconnect them for 5 seconds. Oh, and as I click through the presentation. I mean, we had to know that technical difficulties were going to happen in this. So yeah, I think that moment for me really just showed that 5 in 5 of us really does have mental health, and we can struggle at any time, even if based on what you see on social media or how people are presenting, doesn't line up with what you maybe think is going on.
Yeah, so in order for us to speak up about mental health, we need to have a firm grasp on what mental health even means, right? So mental health is commonly defined as a state of well-being, like physical health, that affects our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In this way, it is different from mental illness. Everyone has mental health, and just the way we would look at our body's health, it is never a black and white issue, right? So mental health exists on a spectrum, and it can fluctuate from healthy to stressed to struggling to in crisis. And based on where we fall on the spectrum, we may need different supports in order to keep us healthy. So these distinctions are crucial in building awareness, not only in relation to how we feel, but also how others feel, right? If we can identify where we fall on this spectrum at any given time in our lives, we are more likely to be able to do what's right for us and for one another. So this here illustrates that mental illness is a cluster or pattern of symptoms. Okay, so thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Some examples of mental illnesses include depression, anxiety and personality disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorders, addiction, just to name a few. Mental illness also lies on a spectrum from no diagnosable mental illness to mild, to moderate, to severe mental illness. So being farther left on the spectrum means you are dealing with more symptoms that impact your daily life, right? Mental illness can come in, all different shapes and sizes, and no one is affected the same. No two cases of depression, for example, will ever resemble each other, right? And the symptoms we experience will differ from person to person. Now, it is important to note that while we may all experience a mental illness differently, it's never a reason to invalidate, right, what someone else might be going through. So our health can be also viewed on a dual spectrum. So as we see a bit better now, mental health and mental illness are not the same thing, and they interact with each other on this dual spectrum. So in the top left quadrant, it's important to note that someone with a severe mental illness, so someone dealing with many symptoms that impact their daily life, can still have optimal mental health. So for example, you get a diagnosis, you understand what your mental illness is, you have the necessary supports in place, so therapy, medication, accommodations for school or work, and using these tools can help manage their symptoms. So I know for me on a personal level, finding the right therapist was a huge part of managing my mental illness and maintaining optimal health. In the bottom right quadrant, so similarly, someone with no diagnosable mental illness can actually still struggle with their mental health. So this is a little surprising. So for example, someone recently had a loss in their family. They may be struggling with their mental health, but they might not have any discernible mental illness. So just because you've never been diagnosed with a mental illness before, it doesn't mean like you aren't struggling with your mental health.
Yeah, so talking about terms like struggling, there's ways that in all of us can have a hard day to day. Maybe you wake up, you stub your foot at the side of your bed and puts you in a bad mood for the rest of the day. And that's very normal. But when we want to think about something and calling it a struggle, we want to think about three things. So the first is it intense? So let's say you wake up one day and you're feeling kind of sad. So you cry a little bit and feel badly, but now it's feeling like, okay, this sadness is really deep. It's like much more intense than I've felt before. And is it long lasting? So is it not like, oh, I just watched an episode of This Is Us and I cried afterwards, because who among us doesn't do that? But okay, I watched that episode of This Is Us and now I've been crying for 2 weeks. So things like that, where it's lasting for a longer time. And is it having a big impact? So as I kind of mentioned in my story earlier, the sense that this level of stress I was experiencing in school was leading me to not be able to sleep or to eat properly. And that's kind of having a big impact on your life. Is it impacting sort of your socializing? I wasn't seeing any other people. So that's some of the things that you can tell that that's a struggle. But when we think about a crisis, so that's sort of when we thought about the spectrum and we went from struggling to crisis, from that yellow to red, we think about a risk of harm. So that might be harm to ourselves or harm to other people around us. And that's something we really want to be mindful about, and knowing that that's when we really need to be seeking emergency support right away. We can't be waiting. But we'll get a little bit more into the crisis aspects further on in the presentation.
Right. Yeah. So there are several factors, right, that can impact our mental health and could potentially contribute to something that could cause us to struggle, right? So in the middle here, we have you. So this encompasses your age, gender, race, sexual orientation, genetics, past experiences. All these things make up your unique self. And most of the factors in this category are outside of our control, right? Next, we have individual health behaviors. So this includes our knowledge, behaviors, and attitudes. For example, some people are very open to the idea of therapy. Others are quite resistant, right? So this can have quite a large impact on our health.
Another thing that we can look at is things like our social support. So the people around us, our friends, our family, teachers, coaches, elders, people in our community. And also with that is thinking about, and from a mental health perspective, what is their knowledge and awareness about mental health? Is it something that is able to be talked about and open, or is it something that has a lot of stigma and is a bit more closed off in those circles? And that can have a big impact as well.
And also next, we have living and working conditions. So this includes safety, autonomy, support, balance. So things like food insecurity, job insecurity, these could be big problems for, immigrants or newcomers to the country, where maybe their credentials aren't recognized and they come to Canada with very little money. This could take a rather significant toll on their mental health.
Definitely. And the final aspect is access to health services. So, depending on where you live, the population you're a part of, how many services are in your area, can really impact your ability to seek that professional support. So, are you living in an urban center like Toronto or even like London or Hamilton? Are you in a more remote community where there might be little to fewer counseling or support services? And how kind of able are those to be culturally competent? Are they aware of different factors that are impacting marginalized communities or different marginalized identities? And how aware are they dealing with those sorts of issues that will impact your level of safety being able to access those services? So those are kind of the main intersections. But then if we sort of zoom out a little bit more, we think about some of the larger structures that kind of outline and support the inner center. So thinking about things like our cultural norms and values, and that could be the culture of Canada, or if you are born from outside of the country or your family comes from outside of the country, that could have different sort of cultural norms and values that are upheld from there that have been brought here to Canada and are still impacting on your life. And this is where things like stigma or openness or not around mental health can live. So are you part of a culture that really supports the open and honest conversations of mental health, or are other things like academic success, material wealth, and things more prioritized, and things about mental health are more shunned away? On the other side of that, we have large things like the structure, so schools, churches, hospitals, and the laws and policies in place that often can disproportionately affect people in marginalized groups. So the fact that Indigenous youth are 5 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than non-Indigenous youth, the fact that in 2018, there were 42% of African Canadians experiencing hate crimes at the hands of law enforcement, things like that, that are sort of disproportionately affecting marginalized groups, which can certainly have an impact on how you're able to live and sort of function day to day, depending whether you feel supported and valued by the larger structures around you or not. So the question we want to sort of be asking ourselves is, how can we be there and be a support for ourselves? Because that's sort of going to always be our first line of contact. So the first part of that is being able to sort of check in with yourself. It's knowing your body and your mind and thinking about like, is this a good day? Is this a bad day? And how do I cope with that? So that's kind of how it flows into doing what you need to do. So if that means I'm feeling really stressed out today, maybe I need to take a break from my schoolwork, or I need to take a 15-minute break from my job right now and go do a little walk around the block just to get a bit of fresh air and energy. The final part is seeking help when you need it. So if you're in that moment of struggling or crisis, or even it's a weird time right now. COVID's happening. There's a lot less access to one another and to the normal supports that we have. And do we have that extra support on the outside to help us get through that?
Yeah, and to start diving in a bit deeper here with the ways we can be there for ourselves, there's a few questions that we can ask, right? The first being, how are you practicing self-compassion? So for me personally, practicing self-compassion means, taking breaks when I need to, forgiving myself, viewing myself in the third person sometimes helps, like I would a friend. It's quite common that we treat ourselves much differently than we would our friends. So it's good to be mindful of this. I can also, I tend to ruminate. So that can be a problem. And my screen just went black. So I am welcome back. I am here. So practicing self-compassion allows me to be kind to myself and can help silence that pesky inner critic, right? And the second question that we can ask ourselves is, what does feeling unwell look like? So when I'm unwell, it's hard for me to get out of bed. Things like eating and proper hygiene can become substantially more difficult. I may stop going out, miss social gatherings with friends. Being aware of what unwell looks like for you allows us to be able to get back on track.
Definitely. So the idea of doing what you need to do. So thinking about how are you actively day to day, or even in an ongoing sense, if it's not all the time, thinking about ways to build up your self-esteem and build yourself up. So we often like to think about the idea that when you're in your worst state of wellness, it's not always a great time to be thinking about the supports and things that you need in place. When you're in a better state and feeling a little bit better, it definitely makes sense in that time, when you have a bit of a better headspace, to do that preparation. So when you're in a moment of struggle, you have those resources available. And the other question is, how are you looking after your body's needs? So that looks like lots of different aspects. Like, what are you getting daily or sort of regular exercise in a way that you like, whether that's walking, dancing, running, weightlifting, doing whatever you need to do to sort of help your body that way? Are you eating the proper foods that kind of keep you fueled up and doing well, drinking water, or even things for relaxation, so you're not living in a permanent state of stress? Are you taking good breaks throughout your day to kind of get up and move around from this very computer locked life we're living right now, and doing those kinds of things to help rejuvenate your mind and your body together?
Yeah, and also seek help when you need it. So some questions we can ask: how open are you to reaching out for help? I know the first time I reached out for help, I was pretty scared. I felt like a failure, like something was wrong with me for needing that extra support. When I was in college, I had high expectations for myself. It felt like nothing really, went as planned, right? I just want to urge everyone to acknowledge that these feelings you have are normal, but to never let it stop you from seeking help that you may need. And also, who can you talk to if you're struggling? Okay, so knowing the resources that you can connect with, whether it's like a friend, a family member, a general practitioner, you're a psychologist, maybe it's like a community center of some kind. Depending on what we need, there are a variety of different resources and people in our lives that we can reach out to if we're struggling.
Definitely. So Alex
Yes.
listed a lot of the resources here, but he also did some awesome research into a couple specific supports in your area. So I'll let him touch on that a little further.
Yeah. So the first being CMHA's walk-in crisis services. Now that's located on 21 Richmond Street in Strathroy. So they offer a wide range of services there. But it is important to know if you are at risk of harming yourself or others, there's also the Strathroy Middlesex General Hospital Emergency Department, and that's on 395 Carey Street, also located in Strathroy. As well, there is Family Services Thames Valley, which is located on 395 Carey Street. So they work with individuals, couples, families, and they support people through various different life events, transitions, distress, emotional pain, relationship difficulties, etc. And finally, Open Closet. So Open Closet is a social support group for the LGBTQ plus community, geared towards youth between the ages of 14 and 18, and they serve Perth, Huron, Lambton, Elgin, Middlesex, and Oxford. So if you ever want to connect with a group there, their number as well is 1-866-920-1601.
Awesome. And one thing I often like to shout out on this slide as well is you have the supports from before for Kids Help Phone, so the number to text if you want to reach them, or the phone number. But there's also an awesome resource on their website there where you can find resources in my area. So if you're in Strathroy or London right now and you or a friend or someone is struggling with addictions issues or intimate partner violence, you can type the area you're in and it will sort resources for you based on the issue that you're wanting to deal with. This can also be helpful if for some reason and now or in the near future you move to a different community and you don't know the resources that are available in that area. It will show you resources in the different regions all across Canada. So that can be a really helpful resource too if you're starting out and want a specific type of resource and don't kind of know where to begin. Also, to think about in seeking out support services, just sort of a few good things to keep in mind. First being that there is no problem that's too big or too small. So it could be like the death of your hamster is like a huge event for someone else, or another person, it might be just trying to hand in a paper that's really like causing you a lot of grief, or the death of a parent. So different things can impact people in different ways, and just know whatever experiences you're going through are valid and deserve to be supported. And there's lots of different types of resources. So there are social workers, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, different types of counselors, all different sorts of support. That if you try one thing, which is also kind of tying into the last point of don't give up, if you go and you try one counselor and you know what, they're not a really great fit, we don't get along really well, similar to the real world, you don't like 100% of the people that you meet out in the real world. So it makes sense you're also not going to like 100% of the counselors or mental health supports that you meet or try. That doesn't mean that you're unable to connect with people that help or find the help you need. It just might mean that you need to try something or someone else, and that's okay.
Yeah, and those are definitely some key things to keep in mind. And now I want to share, with everyone a little bit of a story that's personal to me about a way that we can, shows how we can be there for ourselves, because it's not always the easiest thing to do, right? So, I had an experience when I was reaching out, and there was a challenge for me to open up during a particularly difficult time in my life, which made things even harder for me. So I was that kid with the fairly lucky parents who had to put up with their son playing, guitar or drums too loud. When I finally had a band to practice with, it was a pretty big deal for everyone involved. Not only did, my my parents, like they could finally eat dinner without getting heartburn, I could kind of also like live out my childhood fantasy, right? But when I began to suffer from depression, my life changed. So I was completely hopeless. Nothing really brought me any pleasure anymore. I stopped showing up to band practice, and I had very, major difficulty leaving bed. So thankfully, my bandmates reached out to me on social media. It might not sound like a lot, but having friends show their concern made like a huge difference in my life. They asked if I was okay and if there was anything I needed. And I felt so alone at the time, I couldn't even reply to my friends, but they kept on trying, they kept on messaging me. A few days had passed, and with enough prying, I finally did open up to them about what was going on. And one thing that people may feel before they open up, right, is a fear of judgment. And I certainly had that fear, but surprisingly, it didn't come true, right? So instead, I was met with compassion and encouraging words from my friends. And it was such a relief to get it off my chest and to know I had people in my life who supported me. Through this experience, I learned that when times are tough, it is important to reach out because there are people in your life who care, no matter how dark it might get, right? If you notice, and I really do urge this, if you notice a sudden or concerning change in behavior from a friend or family member, simply by asking, is there anything on your mind, that could save someone's life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Alex. Oh. Yeah. So now we're going to kind of go through what we kind of call our golden rules. So the ways in which, like Alex's friends and his band did, we're able to sort of reach out to friends or loved ones we might be thinking are struggling in some way. So the first thing that you really want to do is to say what you see. So as Alex's friend, I wouldn't want to come and be like, hey, Alex, you seem really sad. I think this is what's happening for you. And try to give him a diagnosis. That's not helpful. So I might point out some of the things I was seeing of, hey, Alex, I've noticed you haven't really been showing up to band practice anymore. Is everything okay? I haven't seen you around in a little bit.
Yeah, and the second rule is show you care. So arguably, this is one of the most important steps. This could be telling that same friend, I care about you, I've been worried about you. It's so important to get this point across, as simple as it may seem, because it can really help someone feel less alone and less isolated during a time like that.
Definitely. And the third thing is you really want to hear them out. So you don't want to have your friend start to open up and tell you about the hard time with their goldfish dying, and for you to jump right in and be like, when my goldfish died, I did this and this and this. That's not really helpful in that moment. So you really want to just give that friend that space to be able to tell you what's going on for them and what their experience is like, and just really being that open and honest space for them to be able to talk freely and know that there's no judgment.
Definitely. And golden rule 4 is know your role. So we're having this conversation to see if we can help, right? And sometimes with best intentions, we can accidentally do things that might make the situation worse, kind of along the lines of what Megan mentioned, right? So we don't want to make it about us, our thoughts, or the experiences that we've had. It's good to not judge, right? Or imply that their feelings are not valid. Unless asked for, do not give advice, right? So sometimes we can, accidentally invalidate others' feelings if we are, if we're not thinking properly. So we've all been guilty before of that, maybe we said something, and toxic positivity, that is real, and that might have been something that could have upset your friend, right? So instead of saying something like, stop being so negative, you're just bringing yourself down more, you can replace that with, it's normal to be feeling negative in this situation, or depression is like a really tough thing to go through. I'm here for you. Things like that. Just, it's quite a change in the language, and it's more inclusive language, and language that is not, telling someone what they have to do, right?
Mhm. And the fifth one is that you want to connect them to help. So just because you're the friend that they are opening up to, and that it's great as a friend or a family member, you're there to support them, know that that doesn't mean you now automatically become this person's therapist and now have to have all the answers and do all that work. Part of being that good supportive friend or person in someone's life is helping them get to the professional help that they need. So whether that is sitting with them while they call Kids Help Phone, or giving them the number, or helping them find some resources within their community that might work for them. Knowing that you're not responsible for them, but you are responsible to kind of help them get that support if they're needing it. So we also just want to be specific here, thinking about the idea of a crisis, like we talked about before. So that's when there's a potential risk of harm to yourself or to others. So the first thing you want to be doing is asking really direct questions. So if someone's saying, like, I want to go to sleep for a long time, or kind of dancing around that topic, you want to be really direct, saying, like, are you thinking about suicide or hurting yourself? Or do you have a plan, or have you been researching one? That can feel super scary and intimidating in the moment, I know, but there's actually a ton of research that's been done that asking someone that question is never going to put that idea into somebody's mind if it's not there already. It's just going to create a space that if those thoughts are on their mind, to let them know it's okay to talk about them out loud and get that help. And also, you want to make sure that you're staying with them if you're able to. So whether you're in the house with them, it's a little bit more challenging given the situation now, but even staying connected with them, getting any harmful objects out of the way, and just really taking this moment seriously and just trying to stay with them through it.
Exactly. And in addition, ask if they have a mental health support, right? So is there any way you can connect them with that person? Also make sure you have the support you need. So even if they don't have a clear plan, there are many different supports you could reach out to. You could ask them if they have a therapist, a social worker, or counselor that they usually speak to. And if you connect them with that person, that can go a long way, right? So a mental health support who knows the person's history can provide a lot more insight in regards to what might be helpful for them in a time of crisis. They could also reach out to a crisis line like was mentioned earlier, such as Kids Help Phone. And also, and that's all I wanted to say for that slide. Yeah.
So a few things you can do if there's a sense of immediate danger. You can walk with the person into an emergency room. You can call 911 and ask for a mobile crisis unit. And ideally, you want to try to connect people with local mental health supports. So people in the community can often be a better option, depending on people's experiences with the police or the community that they're a part of. That might not always be the best option for certain individuals or certain communities. So mental health support in this opportunity is ideally what we want to be using as the first line of defense. And if after everything else maybe doesn't come through, police can be an option, but ideally we want to be trying to stick to more local mental health aspects.
And yeah, so just as a recap here, right? So being there for yourself. So this is something that is, very important. And being there for ourselves can be crucial in times that we need. Sometimes we're not always going to have supports around us, and being there for ourselves is an essential part of that.
And we also want to remember to be there for each other. So using those 5 golden rules we kind of talked about of ways to support friends, family members, loved ones, and keeping an eye for moments when people might be struggling and making sure that we're having those really important conversations with people as we need to. Part of that, as well as it was mentioned in an earlier slide, if after the end of everything, you're like, what were those random people on Zoom talking about that one time? We've created a resource called bethere.org that has all the golden rules listed of how to support someone in crisis and a ton of other great resources of how to be able to support the people in your life that you love. So if absolutely nothing else you remember from the presentation, remember that website because it will have all the steps you need to be able to support the loved ones in your life. And this is just a little kind of mock go through of what it looks like going onto that site.
All right, so where do we go from here, right? We've given everyone hopefully some tools today to use in order to be there for ourselves and to be there for others. So things you can take with you into the real world, right? That's what we believe. And presentations like these can spark interest and help raise awareness, but they are not a solution to creating sustainable community change. And this is why we encourage every young person to get involved if you can. So young people, they have a lot to offer, fresh perspectives and attitudes. And young people today are, hungry for change. So our youth are more empowered than they have ever been. And this is the time, right? So it may sound daunting, but the decisions we make now will determine what kind of society we live in the future. So 10, 20, 30 years down the road, the decisions we make now will have a great impact.
Mm-hmm. So another part of getting involved is if you liked what you heard today and you're like, wow, those people on Zoom were so cool and awesome, which we know. You can join us at jack.org. We are always recruiting more volunteer speakers. So doing what Alex and I do, everything's running remotely right now during COVID, but in non-COVID times, we get to go out into the community and do presentations at high schools, universities. I've gone on some pretty awesome trips to different parts of Canada through jack.org too. You get to give talks just like these. And that's for anybody over the age of 18. And we can answer questions about that if people have them. Or if you're in high school right now, we do encourage the creation of Jack chapters. So that's like localized communities in your larger community or in your school that run mental health initiatives throughout the year. So they kind of keep that conversation going outside of just the single Jack talk. And these are just some of the resources, again, that you can look to if you are in need of support. And I will go back to that. I'll leave that slide up. But just again, thank you guys, everyone, for coming out today. Sorry, we ran a little bit over time there, but it happens when tech issues are coming about. But you guys have been an awesome audience, and I'm going to stop sharing now so I can come back into the presentation and see if there are any chats going on. So just give me a hot second to do that. So I'll stop that. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to just look through and check in on any questions. If people have more questions, go ahead and throw them up in the chat and Alex or I can sort of field them. Or if people want to raise like any hands in the participant section, I can't see a lot of people, which is fair enough, but just know that that's option. Okay. Awesome. So someone is talking about that they have gone to see a counselor and learned some strategies when they're feeling stressed, and it's been really helpful for them, which is amazing. That's like totally what we want to hear, and I'm glad to hear that you're getting that support and it's going well.
Looks like someone else here said that self-compassion is so important. From Megan, our inner critic is our worst enemy. Echo that. Yeah, absolutely. It's very strange how differently we treat ourselves at times than we treat other people. It's being mindful of that is very, very important.
Yeah, I see the resource reach out, the helpline being added there. So that's a different resource. If you're outside of the age range that's being serviced by Kids Help Phones, another crisis support people can be using. Okay. Yeah, anytime. We're getting some thanks for sharing personal stories and things to kind of bring back to school communities, which is great. I can't totally speak for Alex, but for myself, a big part of why I wanted to get involved in this work was not having all that knowledge and access to those resources when I was in high school, and wanting to sort of change the world in which we live by being able to sort of help break down that stigma, normalize the experiences that we're all going through, and hopefully it's helping. So thanks guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Megan and Alex. Just going to share my screen again. I really appreciated how you broke down the importance of and reinforced the importance of caring for ourselves and caring for each other. It's really that simple, but it's so critical. And again, I want to reiterate my sincere appreciation of you both sharing some of your own personal experiences, which we could all relate to. It's been a few years since I was a young person, but I remember feeling very lost and some of my friends going through some mental health crises, and I had no idea what to do or even really understanding what was happening. So this was super helpful, a wonderful resource. Thank you so much. So I just want to turn it over to Debbie. As it promised, there was a draw for prizes.
Yes, and I do note that there is a question that has just come across on the chat that I don't know if Alex and Megan wanted to address quickly or if they wanted to follow up with the individual. They're just asking about, can you talk about there being any links to too much screen time, social media, and depression, and how young a person can be, how they can deal with it during COVID.
It's a very good question. Megan, did you have any thoughts, or I have a few? Megan? Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone here has seen quite a recent documentary called The Social Dilemma, but it was available on Netflix, and it was a documentary that kind of highlighted, I will say, correlations, right? So there's a difference between a correlation and a causation. So there are researchers now that have pointed to a strong correlation in the amount of screen time someone spends and their mental health. But I think we're still trying to figure out how this relationship, right, works, because to say it's a causation would be quite bold, but I think it certainly has an effect. And during, how can young people deal with that during COVID? So that's really tough. Right now, we are all inside. So we're not really interacting with people face to face, and that face-to-face interaction is so important for our well-being. Like as human beings, we were designed to, enjoy face-to-face interaction with others. And right now, that has put a big strain. COVID has put a big strain on that. So I would recommend, for young people during a time like this, doing safe, if you want to stay in touch, like in your social bubble or with immediate family, doing safe, socially distanced activities outdoors, right? It's getting cold. We live in Canada, so it might be a little bit harder to do some of those activities that you could normally do in the the warmer months. But there's still things we can do, right? With still winter, maybe, this prompts us to start engaging in more winter activities, outdoor winter activities with one another. Because, balancing, the safety of everyone from COVID and our mental health, it really can be a balancing act.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to let the winners know, for confidentiality, I'll just say the person's first name and their first letter of their initials. And I will be sending out emails to those people this week to connect to how to get out your gift cards. So there are 3 winners and 3 $25 gift cards. So the first winner is Diane and last initial P for a $25 Amazon gift card. Then the next winner is Rebecca P, and she has won a Shoppers Drug Mart gift card, $25. And Abby Z, she has won a $25 Ultimate Dining gift card. So congratulations, everyone.
Yay.
Okay, so that marks the end of our event. Thank you to everyone for attending. It was really exciting to see the numbers going up as the presentation went on, and this was an important, vital conversation to have. So thank you, and please watch for the follow-up communication about the event that will provide more resources for you. Have a good evening.